What are the results when you look just like, you behave just like, you message just like every other brand that would be in the category of the space? What happens? You can't stand out and fit in at the same time. When you fit in, you just fit in. It's a sea of homogeny. And so there's little room for excellence. There's little room for growth, for expansion, for new territory.
At Mechanism, we build iconic brands with soul and science. The soul is culturally relevant brand building, and the science is the always-on marketing activities that drive the bottom line. Learn more at mechanism.com. In a world where our campaigns can be too safe, and like our campaigns and our work in the creative industry, we ourselves can fall into this trap and play our careers too safe. Today on the Soul and Science podcast, we're talking to a person who has built a legacy on taking calculated risks. Chase Jarvis is an award-winning artist, entrepreneur, and photographer. He has been part of crafting global campaigns for Apple, Nike, and over 100 other brands. He was also a key figure in the Pulitzer Prize winning New York Times story, Snowfall. And he has been the founder and CEO of several game-changing startups, including Creative Live. Today, we're talking about Chase's experience and his new book, Never Play It Safe. Let's dive in and explore the soul and science of standing out. We will get into his new book that is coming out right after this podcast launches. But before we get to the book,
Sure.
I want to roll it back. And I want you to tell me your origin story, how you grew up. Did you have creativity in your bones? Did you know you wanted to start in photography? Like, give me the backstory.
Well, before I dive right into the backstory, hat tip to you. Love the show. What is it? Longtime listener, second time caller, second time on the show
Perfect.
here. But you know, the point that you talked about, like, I felt like I was a little creative hustler in advertising and marketing all the way back. Let's go to the summer between first and second grade. We're going way back, bro.
Okay, we need more for time for the podcast. Holy shit!
I made a film the summer between first and second grade and screened it in my friend's parents' basement to a sold out audience. We sold out all the concessions and made a profit. My first film, it was a 6-minute silent film, all edited in camera with a Super 8, and it was profitable. And so I rolled into second grade feeling pretty dang good about myself. I also had a comic strip. I had a stand-up comedy routine and a magic show. Was selling I mean, again, for the marketers in the audience, I was selling my a weekly comic strip for the exact same price as milk. So you could choose to like buy lunch and then use your milk money to buy my comic strip. And
how did you printed it at like?
I drew it up, and then my mom made photocopies because she was a secretary at a different business. And so I would draw it up, she would photocopy it, and I would hand it out for lunch money. But the weird twist here is that Miss Kelly, my second grade teacher, she didn't like this.
She no likey.
She, you can't sell your comic strip. You can't have a business here in second grade. And by the way, you're not all that creative. The magic thing is not that good. You're stand-up comedy. So she essentially told my parents this at the parent-teacher conference I was a part of for a few minutes. And she said, you should just focus on sports. You're a good athlete and don't do this creativity entrepreneur stuff.
Interesting.
And so I did. And fast forward, I just became what I would consider the most like down the road, Main Street, boring. I won the typical senior award when I graduated, however many years later, whatever, 10 years later. And I was the captain of the football team. I dated a cheerleader. I just, we did all the stuff. I got good grades and essentially eschewed all of this, what I thought was interesting when I was a kid, creativity and the connection that I had, my authentic self, this entrepreneur, this little hustler. And I learned a lesson there. And the lesson that I learned was just got to fit in, do your stuff. And we all know how that plays out. You can fast forward not too long. And when my grandfather dropped dead on the floor of his garage the week of my college graduation, I realized that I was not going to play professional soccer, and I realized that I was going to bail on medical school, which one I was headed for, because that's what my parents thought I should be and do. And I went and walked the earth with my dead grandfather's camera and essentially reconnect with that second grade self.
Wow, that's amazing. How old were you when you walked the earth with the camera? Were you like 17?
No, I was 21.
21, okay.
And with my then girlfriend, now wife. And it was just this reconnection to that part of myself that I had largely ignored. And, that is the basis for my new book, which is called Never Play It Safe. And the punchline to that is that all the best stuff in life is on the other side of our comfort zone. And yet the world will talk us out of our dreams. And it's usually we get talked out of our dreams by people who have given up on theirs. And so over the last, what I would just say 20 years as a lifelong creator and entrepreneur, someone I ultimately ended up really embracing that part of myself, thanks in part to my grandfather's passing and my realization that the world will have us believe it is one way and it is really the other. And it's really a journey back toward, back to ourselves over and over again. So
yeah, I have a couple questions following up on your story.
Sure.
First of all, shout out to your wife, Kate, who is
she's a powerhouse.
She's awesome and so cool. All right, so shout out to her. But when you did your walkabout with the camera, was there a point on that journey where you're like, this is filling me up so full, I want to do this for work?
Yes. And yet I was simultaneously aware of that and terrified. And aware because when you do something that you love, and everyone who's listening has experienced this, when you do the thing that you're meant to do, or whatever that thing is, when you're a writer and you're writing, when you're a filmmaker and you're making films, when you're a mom and you're momming, like you just feel differently in your body, in your head, your heart, and your soul. And so that's what photography was for me. And simultaneously, I was aware that the world was full of my world, I will say, rather than the world. My world was full of people who loved me very much, who cared about me, who wanted the best for me. And if I told them that I was really wanted to be a photographer, there would be a massive disconnect, record scratch. Like, I thought you were like, I was on basically I went to college on a soccer scholarship, played on the Olympic development soccer team. And that was a plan. And then to say, no, I'm not going to do that. And by the way, this whole medical school thing, which was my plan B, also, I'm bailing on that and I'm going to become a photographer. It was very confusing for the world. And it was very difficult for me, despite being white, male, born in America. I mean, lower middle class. I was, basically my dad was a cop and my mom was a secretary, but that was the most difficult thing in my entire life. And that's with every possible advantage, right? And it's acknowledging that there are so many people who come from way less advantage. And so I can only imagine, like, wait a minute, what are we doing and what ought we do differently to help people find that true element of themselves, connect them with that, and get to live that life instead of the one that everybody else is designing for us.
I notice when you tell your story, although you're proud of some of those achievements, you really are painting the story as you were sort of following expectation. You weren't pushing into differentiated territory, unique territory. You were doing the conventional successful path, right?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about how important it is in your mind to, follow your authentic life, but to differentiate, to be risky, to take risks, to do something a little bit different than what society's trying to push you into.
Well, and this has, it's the overlap for the marketers listening is not lost on anybody here in the show, right? Why are we attracted to rock stars? Because they're willing to put it all out there, to take a chance, to turn themselves inside out in front of us all. Truly, like, that's one of the things that is interesting to us and as a species. And we look at, a whole host of folks who take a different path. And the fact that we're social animals, our biology tells us to fit in. And we run to that naturally. That's our sort of
we don't want to get kicked out of the herd.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that the concept of French philosopher René Girard talks about mimesis. We really only do much like the things that we see, right? That's who we want to become, as the closest, the person who's closest to us and is safe in the tribe. That's what we sort of mimic. And, you extend this to advertising. And so what are the results when you look just like, you behave just like, you message just like every other brand that would be in the category of the space? What happens? You can't stand out and fit in at the same time. When you fit in, you just fit in. It's a sea of homogeny. And so there's little room for excellence. There's little room for growth, for expansion, for new territory.
In advertising and marketing, you think it's safe and no one's going to get fired and you're doing what everyone else is doing. But really, that is the riskiest proposition, because you're really throwing your money away, because no one's going to notice you and they can't remember. They know, oh, that's a financial ad. I can't remember who it was, or I don't know that brand. You're not doing brand building. You're just selling the category. Right?
Exactly.
You're not selling your company or your brand.
And then let's map that onto the life of a human being, which to me, this is one of the reasons I was excited to be on your show, is because the parallel of these two things, it's a 100% parallel. Because think of the best brands in the world. How do they differentiate in their marketing and advertising? It's wildly different. And then by extension, think of the best things in your life, the best moments. What were you doing? You were doing something that was very uniquely you, with people that you distinctly love. And you felt very free. You weren't bound by all the typical trappings of what a good second grade student looked like, or what a great, homecoming king looked like, or like those things are just, they're almost, laughably boring. They're cliche. That's the definition of it. Right. And yet, when we think about all the best stuff in life, when we think about the best advertising and marketing, it's radically unique, and it seems like it's bathed in risk, but that's where we go wrong.
And Never Play It Safe, and it's a practical guide. There's the book. It's a practical guide, but there's a juxtaposition between being practical and being risky, right?
Yeah, and that's an intentional little twist there.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I hear practical, I think of, okay, safe, risk averse. Tell me more about the book and how you help people really find their personal power, but without blowing up their lives, right? Yeah. Without getting divorced, quitting their job, having no money,
moving to France, wearing a beret. Yes.
Yeah. That's easy to do, to one day wake up and be like, I'm going to blow the whole thing up. That's not necessarily the best play, though. Right?
Sure. Yeah. And to me, this was, speaking of a little backstory. So you and I have the same book agent.
Yeah.
And he's incredible.
Yeah. He's the best.
And he's the best. He's the best. And I've been working on this book for 18 months, 5 months of research and tightening the concept, and then 13 months in earnest, as in writing every single day. And 8 weeks before this book was due, I threw it all in the trash, fired the team that I had hired to help me work on it, and started from scratch with 8 weeks to go on my deadline.
Fuck. Okay.
Exactly. And I go to my agent, I go to Steve, and I tell him this. It's that book that I've been working on. Yeah, it's tidy. It's a nice little book where business intersects creativity, and it will sell well. And there's nothing special about it. And I'm aware of this. And so I cannot do this. And here is the way that I would like to change it. Here's how I'm thinking about it. And I need you to back me on this. And he's like, he's like, first of all, Steve is very rational. He's like, okay, cool. We're gonna breathe into this one.
And he's seen it all.
And he's seen it all. He's a G. He's been around the block. And I share with him what my intent is, and he's like, this is insanely good. And so we got on the phone with our publisher, and everyone who's listening has pitched something at some point. They're marketers, right?
Of course.
And I was on fire in this pitch. I just, dunked on this pitch and hung up the Zoom call with my publisher with the green light, and 8 weeks to go. And it has never been easier for me to write a book. Now, it was difficult because the hours were long, but
you didn't get more time?
I did not, because I had already had all my extensions.
Oh, wow.
The publication date was already set. So I just ran headlong. And again, this is what alignment feels like. Everyone has felt when their team is firing on all cylinders. Everyone knows what it feels like to be doing the right thing at the right time. And that's the feeling that I had. And how this manifested is, God, there's just such a parallel between that seemed risky at the time, right? And yet it would have been so much worse to put out a book that was not differentiated, that did not align with my true values. And here's the twist is that we do this to ourselves all the time. We do the safe thing, thinking that it is what the world needs and wants from us. And yet when we are unapologetically ourselves, or when we put a campaign that takes risks, and I'm not talking, when I say never play it safe, hey, I'm not talking about seatbelts and sunscreen. I'm not talking about emotional or physical safety. Those things are valuable and valid. But beyond that, everything else is usually a story. We do the dirty work on ourselves. We tell ourselves, or we tell our peers or our client that, oh, if we don't do this thing, then we're not going to fit in. We're not going to look like everybody else. And it's going to be tragic because we're going to, stand out in a bad way. And yet, if I challenge anyone listening or watching to give me any counter examples, I have not yet had one person be able to do it, which is any of the things that you would call the best stuff in your life, your relationship, deciding to have kids or not, the career you chose. If you can list the top 10 best things, best decisions, were any of them risk-free? Or did you play the downside on any of those? No, it was always very inconvenient, awkward, and yet you somehow decided to do it. The book that I've written in Never Play It Safe is specifically a roadmap on how to get to that place on the other side of your fear, on the other side of your comfort zone, and on the other side of risk, how to take real intelligent risks. And knowing that everything, that all of our best experiences are on the other side of those, it became so strange to me why we don't have essentially a blueprint or, a framework for how to get there reliably. So, quite simply, I just did a lot of research. I've had more than 1,000 guests on my long-standing podcast called the Chase Jarvis Live Show. And, you and I both get to run around with, very high-performing people. And it turns out there are patterns.
There are patterns that are similar.
There are patterns. And you could apply this to literally any human life. There's a handful of tools that are native within us that culture that we turn off. And this process is basically, the book is identifying these 7 tools and giving us the awareness and a handful of sort of simple ways to reactivate those. Just like our creativity is trained out of us from the young age of second grade, so are so many of these naturally residing tools, like our ability to choose what we pay attention to. A baby, it comes out and it can't really focus, and it's, and it has a hard time. But as soon as when a baby hits a certain age and you watch that baby direct its attention, like, there's mom, right? It's fascinating. That is a very natural state. We are born to be able to do that, regardless of your sort of whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. We all have the ability to direct our attention, and yet we feel like our attention has been hijacked in this modern world. And so there's 6 other tools.
Is that one tool?
It is. That's the first, and I think the most important.
Is part of that giving up junk pleasures that are a waste of time?
It's not about giving those things up, and not dissimilar to what you said. It's not about blowing up your life and getting a new set of friends and moving to France. Or maybe it is. You have to decide.
Okay.
But it is about intentionally deciding what you are going to let into your field of view and taking ownership over that. To me, that is very, very different than deciding to put your feet up and relax and watch a great film.
It's making your life happen versus letting things happen to you, right? And where you feel like you have no agency.
Exactly. And so to me, that's a really important one. Intuition. That to me, this is the most powerful tool we have as humans that we know the least about. The science is starting to be very clear that actual rational cognition is slow and kind of fumbling, and intuition is surprisingly accurate, extremely fast, and gathers billions of additional data points above and beyond our rational mind. So, again, how many times, if I asked you to go back in your history, did you have a feeling that you didn't trust that feeling? And
It always comes true.
yeah, it comes true. So there are a handful of tools. These are examples of a couple that, boy, the cool thing is that they're available to all of us right now. We've just sort of shut them down or turned them off or turned them way down. And this is about reawakening those tools so that you can reclaim, the agency over your life.
What if you're later in your life and you're already on that path? You can't unwind the entire path. Is this guidebook help you reconnect with parts of it? Like you don't have to jump off the entire path?
For sure. And then I know enough to not write a book that would have you pretend that you're 20 years old.
Right, sure.
And to me, that's actually maybe the biggest strength of the book, and what came out of that 8-week exercise of starting a book from scratch is all of those things I was becoming aware of them over the 13 months of writing the wrong book. And it allowed me in the moment to realize that now all the best stuff in life is on the other side of our fear, on the other side of our comfort zone, the other side of risk. And yet we don't have a thoughtful framework for how to do that. And when we do find ourselves in the wrong place, how do we unravel that? Not by burning the boats, but by responsibly, thoughtfully just moving in the right direction. Because the goal is not to ruin anyone's life, especially not your own. The goal is to make your life your very own and put it in a direction and a path that it was meant to be in the first place.
So this is a practical guide. And then do you sort of have a workshop that goes with the book?
I have a handful of things. If people buy the book now, so this podcast is going to drop the week of publication. It means a lot to authors if you buy it now. And if you do, there's I think somewhere on the order of $500 or $600 worth of bonuses. We've got a masterclass that I'm teaching about creativity, and so for the marketers and the advertisers in the audience, it would be valuable. And a handful of other what I just call them bonuses. But yeah, there's essentially a package that comes with the book. My hope, and why I wrote the book, is to chart a very simple, practical path back to ourselves.
Do you feel like you're going to take this and this is kind of your calling now?
Yeah, to me, well, first of all, this is my fourth book, my second word book. I've got a couple of other photography books, but my last book was called Creative Calling, and it was about how there's creativity inside of every person, and it's our job to remember that and use that as a tool for building the life we love. And that did very well, such that I got this is the follow on, essentially the sort of the sophomore comeback of that book. And to me, I'm shocked at the people are coming out of the woodwork, because I feel like we have been so risk averse. We have so much been playing it safe that people are realizing that, you know what? F this. I'm over this stuff. I got to break out. I can't, this roadmap that I'm getting in my Instagram feed of who I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to look and what I'm supposed to do. Like, F that noise. Like, who am I? And so we're all looking for this path back to ourselves. And on the individual side, I mean, I'm on launch day here, and I've already sold more books than Creative Calling sold in its first week. And we haven't even, the book's not even technically out yet. It's out, we're recording this a couple weeks in advance here. And I've had more corporate inbound hearing about the book saying, oh my God, would you please come talk to my leadership team? Because we've forgotten what it means to take risks. We've forgotten what it means to stand out. We've forgotten what it means to be able to be differentiated in a marketing capacity, in a brand capacity, in a leadership capacity. Like, dear God, help us find our way back to ourselves.
I mean, I see that all the time, every day with clients. I mean, I feel like we're in a particular period of time post-pandemic with everything that's happening in the world where we have become safer and risk averse and just trying to get through it.
And to what end? Homogeny, mediocrity.
Yeah. How do you bounce back from failure?
Wow. There's a lot of really good research on failure. And that was, to me, I tend to approach this more as an artist than as a scientist. But I really got into the science of failure in my research here. And the science is actually very clear on how to rebound, and it matches my own experience. And I'll run it by you, and you can tell me if it lines up with your experience, Jason. And research says that iterating matters. Iterating quickly actually matters. And iterating, not just trying again, not just getting up and running back into the fire, but actually thinking about what went well last time and what didn't go well last time. So it's repetition, it's returning to the fight quickly, but with new information and a willingness to adapt. Those three things were, and the group that studied this, I think it was out of Stanford. They studied it across venture capital investments and just across 5 or 6 different industries and vectors. And the results were the same, that if you iterated, you did so quickly, you did so with taking into consideration how and why you failed, essentially a smart failure, that your chances of success were dramatically higher. And notice what this is not. This is not just try and try again, because there's no thoughtfulness to your trying, then
No, it's additive.
absolutely.
It's new information.
Mm-hmm.
You might even fail again, but you're going to fail in a different way. How much time do you think people, with this practical guide, how much time do people need to spend doing these 7 sort of steps? Like, is it like every month you got to reassess? Is it daily? Like, do you have an idea around that?
Sure. There's a chapter in there called time.
Okay.
And what people mistake about time is that it's some hamster wheel that's running in the background and marching us towards our death. The weird thing about time, and everyone has experienced this, is time dilates based on the experiences that we are having. If for example, you've heard the phrase "time flies when you're having fun," or you've experienced flow, where you magically, like, everything's happening right and you just get 10 times more done in an hour than you've ever, than the previous 10 hours or whatever. So let's just take, for example, that on the basis of that, or if you've been in a car accident and you've seen time slow down. I was in an avalanche. I should be dead by every measure. I experienced what felt like minutes in a half a dozen seconds. So if you take that, let's just say time is interesting. To the question that you asked specifically, how long does this take? Well, the fact that who you were yesterday truly has nothing to do with who you can be today. You can have one opinion yesterday and a completely different opinion today if you let yourself. The same is true for any action. Yesterday, you didn't work out, and today I did work out, and I'm calling myself an athlete. Yesterday, you smoked, and today you stopped. We have this idea, like, we are as a culture so obsessed. How long does it take to master these things? My answer to that question is it takes exactly 0 seconds. It's a decision. And how long does it take to decide something? No time. No time passes when you decide something. And so that is sort of my wish. And that's to me, the beautiful unlock is that these things that I'm suggesting that you pay attention to are inside of you, and therefore theoretically are available immediately. And will it take work to make that a habit as opposed to just doing it one time? Sure. But the road back to your fitness, it began with 25 push-ups. It didn't begin by running a marathon. And so if you can, my suggestion is do something instead of nothing. These tools are available for you. Who you were yesterday has nothing to do with who you can be tomorrow. And you can literally change your mind in an instant. You can decide that enough is enough. And that's not to say you're never going to screw it up. Remember, this is about just recovering from the time that you fall off the wagon 10% more quickly, and 25% more kindly, and 50% more wise than the time before.
Well, this is awesome conversation. Is there something that, and maybe it's from the book, something that's inspired you in our conversation? what's inspired me, that got me thinking, is the WNBA. So the WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growth, proving that women's sports aren't just the future, but the present. And they have 133% increase in viewership. There's 10 to 16,000 people attending the games. Their viewership's up, I think, like 170%. They've got brand deals galore. And what's driving this growth is rising star power, increased media coverage, but also 25 years or 26 years of walking, of like not giving up, like sticking with it, refining and marketing it different and talking about it different, attracting new players and finding the cities that are right for it. And that walking analogy that you said earlier, they knew they had it and they just kept with it. They didn't give up on it. Now we're seeing everyone talking about it. But that wasn't overnight. That was 25, 26 years of falling, getting back up, figuring out a new way to do it, experimenting. Now look where they are. So
I'm going to jump right on your version, your inspiration for mine. And I'm going to relate it. It's related to the book. Did they have to go somewhere else? Did they have to go to another planet and get another gender? Did they how did we find this thing? Oh my God, we just became aware that it's right here. It's available to us right now. What if we did something slightly different than we have been doing? What if we remembered that, wait a minute, we're all human beings. There's a great story here. There's a great message that can fuel our transformation. It's right here in front of us, hiding in plain sight. And so is all of the best stuff in your life. It's right there. There are bags of emotional, psychological money just everywhere. All we have to do is see them and decide that we want to pick them up.
I love that. All right, here's my final question. Then I'll let you go. Thank you for all the time you spent on the Soul and Science podcast. Do you have a mantra or a quote that you live by, whether it's before the book, from the book? Do you have something that is recurring? And I'm not talking about when you meditate, what you're saying.
Totally.
I mean, like if you had to get a tattoo on your chest of 3 or 4 words that power you, what would that be?
Well, this is, it sounds like a cop-out, and yet I can't be more brutally honest. The whole time I was writing this book, in that 8-week sprint, I had up in the upper corner of my monitor one thing. One was a picture of my wife, Kate, and in the other picture was a yellow sticky that said, "Don't play it safe." And when I remember that I'm writing this book for, in part my wife, because she has helped me in all of those moments in my life where I was willing and terrified to take a risk in my personal life, in business, to throw away medical school. She was the one who was there saying, "But what does your heart say?" And so this idea of, and then again, this is the thing that powered me to be willing to go into this hole and write for 8 weeks straight. That said, don't play it safe. To me, that would be my phrase. That if all of the best stuff is on the other side, why would I ever be preoccupied with the stuff that's on this side? Never play it safe, baby.
Never play it safe. I want to see that tattoo.
Big. You said on my chest. Okay, I got work.
It can be tiny on your chest. It doesn't have to be all over your chest.
I'm thinking of a big like the Firebird emblem on.
Just don't put it on your neck, please. All right. Thanks, my man.
I appreciate you. Love what you guys do over there. Love this show. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.